Good evening, everyone. So yesterday we learned about some concept related to events. So event binding related concept, what we learned is how do we handle event. We discussed about what is event and we learned about what is event handler and what is event listener. And we learned about what are event arguments. These points we learned. Yesterday we discussed detailedly about this. So event follows which pattern? Event follows a software design pattern called observer. Event follows an observer pattern. Event is not function calling. Event uses a mechanism called delegate. Delegate means it is a function pointer. It is not calling the function. It is pointing towards the function. And what is event handler and event listener? We discuss. We can attach event to any element dynamically by using event listener. And every event have two arguments, default arguments. This, another one, event. What is the job of event arguments? Event arguments are required to deliver the payload to function. Payload is nothing but information about the element and information about the event. Element related information is delivered by this. Event related information is delivered by event. So we discussed about event listener, event arguments. Right? Next, after understanding, we learned default arguments and custom arguments. How to handle default and custom. Next, we need to understand another concept about event is you should know about what is event propagation. What is event propagation? So what is the concept of event propagation? So event propagation. So to understand event propagation, we will see one concept here. So event propagation, how it actually works, means what is the concept of propagation. For example, we are having a HTML page. In this HTML page, we are having a nav. And this is actual nav bar. And we have a button and this is a search button. Just roughly we are having. Now, just for clarity's sake, I will keep some styling. So now have padding 30 pixel and background color is black. Color is white. Font size is 20 pixel. Okay, so what is the concept here is, so we are having a nav bar and a search. So this nav bar, for this nav bar, we are having an event. That means on click. On click, this is nav click. And we have button have on click. On click, this is search click. So what we are doing, writing script. In the script function nav click, So we will have an alert saying that navbar clicked. Okay, and on function search click. So we have a alert saying that search clicked. Search clicked. This is the option we are having. Now we have navbar and we have search. I click on navbar. Anywhere inside the navbar, it says navbar clicked. That's okay, good. And I clicked on search, then it shows search clicked. And when I say OK, and it says navbar clicked. Why? I haven't clicked the navbar. So this is event propagation. Event propagation is nothing but when you push a button which is in a container, and the container is also having an event. Usually when you push, that will automatically simulate the container also. Obviously. That means, so in a outside container, you kept some inside box button. You touch this button, the container also gets simulated. That's happening here. That means I clicked search button, but the search push, actually these buttons are called push buttons. And when you push the search button, it will push the navbar also. Because search is inside navbar and you push, it will simulate the parent. Then even you don't click on parent, it is going to execute it. It is going to execute this. This is generally people also called as event bubbling. But technically it is event propagation. Technically it is propagation. That means a child event, a child element event may simulate the parent element. And the parent event also will fire up. But we don't want that. That means when I click search, only search should work. It should not simulate the parent. It should not propagate the parent. When parent is clicked, it is working. When child is clicked, then only child should work. It should not propagate its parent. So what is event propagation? So the concept is propagation is a technique where the child event can simulate the parent event, the parent element event. The child event can simulate the parent element event. So as parent and the child elements, as parent and child elements use bubble. So use bubble for handling interactions. So as parent and child elements use bubble for handling interactions, and if the inner has to touch it, then without touching the outer, you can't touch the inner. That means outer also will get touched. That means it's simply like a bubble inside bubble. And how you will blow out the bubble inside without touching the bubble outside? It's not possible. Outside compulsory. So that is bubble is a concept of this, but technically it doesn't have bubbling concept. These are all general people words. Technically, internally, it will not have a bubble option. It will have a concept of propagation. That means it propagates. That is called event propagation. Now the question is how to prevent event propagation. How to prevent event propagation? How to prevent this event propagation? So how do we prevent the event propagation? How you prevent the event propagation? It is nothing but actually what we do is now this child element event will use an event argument. Event argument is passed with E. Event is the keyword. We will collect that event E. That means event related all properties you can access here. Now event have a method called stop propagation. We can use this method. So every event by default have a method called stop propagation. Yesterday we saw some properties, client X, client Y, control key, shift key, alt key. Those are all what? They are all event related properties. Event have a method called stop propagation. Stop propagation is nothing but it is an particular method which is used to prevent propagation of child event to parent. That means once the child event completed, then it will not allow to propagate the parent. It will stop the propagation. So you see, now I clicked on the nav, it says nav bar is clicked. And I clicked on search, then search is clicked. And after that, nav bar is not clicked. Previously, it was propagating the event. The child event propagates to the parent. And we need to prevent the propagation. So how we can do that? By using the event method. And what is that event method? Stop propagation. By using the event method called stop propagation. We have to use stop propagation. So syntactically, suppose we have a function, some child event. And what the child event will do is e dot stop propagation. So for example, we have a click on click. We have to pass event as an argument. That is event propagation. So what is event propagation and how do you control this? This is very much required everywhere. In future, so many problems will come. Why so many problems will come? Because in future, what you do, suppose you designed a table. Table is an element. Table may have some events. Table may have some events. Table on click on table, we can change colors, we can change width, height, so many. Inside table, we use buttons like edit button, delete button. That means now table is having events. The buttons in table are having events. Then when you click any button inside table, like insert or update or delete, table also simulates. That means the button event will work and the table event will work. We need to prevent this. And how we can do that? By using stop propagation. that is stop propagation. That is option. Another important point is how to prevent default actions. How to prevent default actions of any generic element. How to prevent default actions of any generic element. How to prevent default actions of any generic element. That is another question. Actually, for that we need to know some events also. Later we will detailedly learn about those events. But as of now, how to prevent default actions of any generic element. What does it means is, actually generic elements. For example, we are having a form. Form is a generic element. Why it is called as generic element? Because form has by default action of submit and reset. Form is a generic container, right? Form have default concept of submitting, resetting, validating also. That means form can submit, form can reset, form can validate. Form is a generic container. It is not just like a div. It has default functionalities. And inside the form, we said username and input type is text and the name is user and we have a button. This button type is submit. Now actually here we are not writing any events here. There is no function, nothing. But what is the point about this is actually this button we will give as submit. Okay. Now what is the concept is you entered some name and click on submit and it have default functionality of submitting. That means it will submit in the URL. So that means form is a generic container. It have default functionality. It have the default functionality of submitting the data, reset the data. So what I want is I want to write a functionality for submit. On submit, we should collect the data and we should send it to some API that will insert into some database. Later we will do that. So it has to do some work given by developer. So how developer will write a functionality for submit? Already submit is doing some work. How we write any functionality for submit? We don't have on click for submit. Submit will not use on click. What it uses? Submit uses a form on submit event. Submit will not have a click. Submit will use a form submit. Form submit, we will write a function. So form submit is a function. Okay, we write a function that is form submit. On form submit, what to do? On form submit, we will put an alert saying that form data submitted to server. This message we are giving. That means now already submit button is having some work and you are giving additional work. So now submit button is going to do two works. It is going to do this alert and it will do its own functionality it have. What is that functionality? Submitting the data in the URL, because currently form method is get. Form method can be get or post. If form method is by default get, the submitted data will be in the URL as query string. This in HTML. So what will happen now is you return submit. I entered some name and I click on submit. Now two functionalities will work. One is the functionality that you define. Okay, that is what alert. After doing the functionality you define, it have its own functionality. It will work that. That means now when I click OK, submit have its own functionality. What is that functionality? Submitting the data in the address bar. Means because it is on get method, it will append in the URL as query string. That means it is going to do two works. One, the work given to it. Another, the work that it actually does by default. We don't want that default work. That means we want submit button only to do the action given by us. We don't want it to do its default functionality. That means we don't want form submit to handle the default functionality. It should just do the work given by us. Even it has some functionality, don't do. Then we will use an event argument for the form submit, and we will access event argument, and through the event argument we use a method. We use a method here called prevent default. Prevent default is another method. This prevent default is not for all elements. This is only for generic element like form. It will not be there for buttons. It will not be there for other elements inside a page. It will be there for the element which are generics. Generic element means by default they have some functionality. Right now what happens here is, now I am entering some name. I click on submit. It will do the work given by you. After doing the work given by you, it will stop. It will not do the default work. Previously, it was enabled with two functionalities. One, the functionality you defined, another one, default functionality. And many times when I give my own functionality, I don't want any default functionality to work. Then how do you prevent that? By using what? Prevent default. So how to prevent default actions? So for any generic element, actually what is the point is, generic elements have default actions to perform. Default actions to perform. You can stop the default actions by using the event method. So that is prevent default. By using the event method prevent default. Event method prevent default. Actually, syntax, usually we have a form on submit is suppose form submit. In this we pass an event. And usually we have a button as submit. So now what we need to configure here is function, form submit. We have an event. This is going to have e.prevent default. These all you are going to use in React. So these are all general basics about events in JavaScript everywhere. These are the common concepts about events. So to handle events in any technology of JavaScript, you should know all the basics of events. So that's what we discussed from yesterday's session and today. So now we are ready to use events in our React. So in our React, we will see how to handle these events. One more is there. Suppose I will give this example here just roughly. Roughly this example to understand. Actual, I haven't saved the previous one, so I need to reset everything. Actual, our previous concept is this one. This is the previous one. I will give that previous example also above for stop propagation. This is example for stop propagation. Huh? I given both examples of stop propagation. Another one is prevent default, right? These all two. Okay, next important after understanding these events. Now another question here. So another important question here. So another question is, first I will give a point here. Suppose we have a button. What is the event for button? What is the button used? What is the event used for button? Suppose we have a drop down. What is the event used for drop down? So button, what is the event? Drop down, what is the event? Events are not related to elements. That means click is not related to button. On change is not related to drop down. Events are not related to elements. Then they are related to whom? Events are related to browser window. Events are related to browser window. And browser window events can be used by elements in the browser window. That means button can use mouse over, button can use mouse out, button can use mouse down. It is not like button should be used with only click. Even heading can be clicked, paragraph can be clicked, div can be clicked, span can be clicked. It is not like click is for button. That means all the events, that means the question here is, so events are configured for element or browser. That is the question actually. So all events used in JavaScript are browser events. All events used in JavaScript are browser events. They are browser events actually. Browser events. So events are configured for an element or actually for browser. Actually, you will configure for all browser events. All events used in JavaScript are browser events defined for element. Defined for element. That means element inherits the browser and browser events it can use. So that means events are actually belonging to browser and the browser elements events are used by elements inside the browser. So that is the reason events are configured for element or browser means the point answer is actually events are defined for element only, but that element events are not related to element. They are related to browser, right? These are all called browser events. We call them as browser events, right? That means actually they are related to BOM. BOM. What is BOM? Browser Object Model. In that case, React cannot use them. In that case, React cannot use them. Why? Because React is not dealing with the actual DOM. React is dealing with the virtual DOM. That means the browser events of JavaScript cannot be used by React. Then how React handles events? Because all the events are related to browser, but React is using a virtual DOM. That means React is not going to use the actual DOM events. Then how React is going to manage the functionality? So React cannot use on click of browser. React cannot use on change of browser. Then how it will handle the events? That means, so here React is using virtual DOM. React is using virtual DOM. How it can? React is using virtual DOM. Then how it can? It can use browser events. React is using virtual DOM. Then how it can use browser events? That is the question. So React is using the virtual DOM. So we need virtual DOM events. So then how the browser events it can use? So the answer is React will not use browser events. Browser events. React will not use browser events. It have a virtual DOM events library. It have a virtual DOM events library called synthetic events. Synthetic events. It have a virtual DOM events library called synthetic events. That means all the events used by React are derived from synthetic events. That means actually, so synthetic event. Another question we will put here. So what are synthetic events? What are synthetic events? The answer for this is synthetic event is the base for all events used by React for in virtual DOM. Synthetic event is the base for all events used by React in virtual DOM. Actually, synthetic events map to actual DOM events, actual BOM browser events, actual browser events. Synthetic events map to actual browser events. So what are synthetic events? That means React is not using the JavaScript events of browser as it is. So React is using a events library. It have a library of events. In this library, some event names are same as you have used in JavaScript, but some names may change. That means all events of browser events are available in synthetic events, but they are not in the same way. So all events in React are derived from synthetic events library. Synthetic event is the base for all those events. That means actually syntactically is nothing but just I will show a point here. Generally what you do is you write, so React actual uses on click. On click is a synthetic event which will map to the BOM event. So this BOM event is which one? On click. On click is the option. That is on click. That means what is the concept here is capitalization matters here. C. On click, it uses a camel case. This is the React event. And this React event is translated into browser event. And what is that browser event? On click. In React, you cannot write on click like this. That will be invalid. Because React synthetic event is in a camel case. And sometimes all names are not same. For example, React uses on double click. Actually, in browser model, it is on DBL click. Actually, it is on DBL click. But here it is not on DBL click anymore. It is using a lengthy name like on double click. Sometimes the event name also changes. You cannot use the same name. That means you should know what is the synthetic event. So the events that you write in React will look similar like the events that you use in JavaScript, but they are not actually browser events. They all are derived from synthetic events, synthetic event library. For example, let's say here, how do we handle that? That means how we can manage this. How to configure events. So configuring events in a React component. How to configure events in React component. How to configure events in React component, same sender subscriber mechanism is required. We know that event have a sender and a subscriber. That means here also event requires a subscriber. Event requires a subscriber defined in function component, in component function. Event requires a subscriber defined in component function. How do you write function? So insert click. That is, and it have an E. E is an event argument. Right. And JSX elements use synthetic event. JSX element use synthetic event. As sender. You know that we need a sender and a subscriber. Sender sends the notification and subscriber will perform the functionality. And how do we write that? So we have a button. Then on click, C uppercase, on click. We need a binding expression. This will point towards insert click like this. That is how we define. It points towards that insert click. That's how we configure. And observe here, when you observe here, we are not writing insert click and a parenthesis. We are not writing a parenthesis. Why you don't need a parenthesis here? We don't need a parenthesis because we are not calling the function. We are pointing towards the function. But in JavaScript, even you are pointing towards the function, you written like a call. Because actually it requires arguments to pass. That is the reason we are having a call. Here we don't write like a call. We write like a pointer. So it is using a function pointer. Function pointer means what? You just need the name of the function where you want to point. That means you don't need to define like a call. So you just need a point towards the function. That means it is pointing towards the function. And what is the concept here is, it is using an listener mechanism. And due to that listener mechanism, that means what happens? This event is registered with the component. Even you written a handler, it is registered at the time of mounting the component. At the time of mounting the component, it will connect the sender and subscriber. That means events are registered at the time of mounting the component, not at the time of creating the component. After creating the component, when component is mounting, in that mounting phase, later we will learn component cycle, complete life cycle, how it works. At the time of mounting the component, it is going to register this event. That is the reason it may look like a handler, but technically it is a listener. It may look like a handler, but technically it is a listener because it attaches and registers the event at the time of mounting the component. That's the reason you don't need to pass any argument. You don't need to pass any argument. By default, event have an argument, you can collect it. Because listener adds the event and registers the event, then automatically argument is also available. That means through this E, tell me what I can access. Only event related details. Huh? Yesterday we saw listener is having only one argument, but it have the ability to access both. What are both? Event related details as well as element related details. How to access element related details? E dot target. We have to use E dot target. That means actually this is a listener. So events are registered. Events are registered at the time of loading the component. You say mounting the component. Hence it uses a listener with event argument. A listener with event argument, which can provide access to both element payload, element data and event data. Access to both element related details and event related details. That means usually what we do here, E dot plain text. So E dot CTRL key, E dot target dot ID like this. E dot target dot class name. We can access like that. So how do you configure the events and define the events in React? So let's see how do we configure and define the events in React. So this is general HTML done. We have done the HTML thing. npm start. Let's add one component here. I will add a new component, some event demo. Okay, add a new file, event demo.jsx. Let's configure the function event demo, and just return the JSX. We are just using this container fluid. Yeah. So we just put a button here. So this is insert. So button have an ID, btn insert, and button have a some class name, btn primary, margin top 3 like this. Okay, now we need to write a functionality for this. Then we write a function. So function name is insert, click. And this function is going to do something like I will put an alert saying that record inserted. Later we can apply some other concept. Okay, now what we need to do, we need to make this function execute when user clicks on this button. Then what we do, we write an event here. What is the event? On click, on click. On click, it should point towards, so dynamic expression, it should point towards what? Insert click. That's it. That means we define the event in this way. Now, actually, we will make this in the startup. We'll make event demo in the startup. And let's see, insert button is there. We have this insert button. So we have this button, we click on this button, then it is performing the functionality. That's working fine. But here so many things we need to learn. So because about the concept of arguments and all these things, but observe carefully. I want to know from where this on click is coming. Okay, let's do one thing. Right click on click and go to definition. Remember, complete React.js library is designed in TypeScript. So React.js is a JavaScript library, but its library is actually designed in TypeScript language. Because TypeScript is the language which provides all the OOP features and better functionalities for a developer. Later you will learn TypeScript also, React with TypeScript, how you will handle it, you will learn. But actual React library is built in TypeScript. And as a developer, you want to know what is behind this, right? What is behind this? For example, we technically call this concept two important things. For a developer, we have concept called reflection. We have reflection. Generally, people who learn object-oriented programming, they know about the concept of reflection. Reflection is actually reflection APIs. They are Java reflection, C++ reflection, C# reflection. We have a reflection API in every OOP language. Suppose you are a Java developer or a .NET developer. So in Java and .NET, some ready-made classes are present. That means ready-made classes are present, or your another team have built a class and they are responsible for designing the classes. As a developer, what is your job is you have to use those classes and you need to build an app. That means your responsibility is building application. For that you need some classes. Those classes are not built by you. They are built by some other people. How as a developer you know in which class what members are present? As a developer, how you know the complete behavior of a class that is not designed by you? We use a reflection API. This reflection API is to track the members of a class and their performances. That means what properties, what methods the class is having, what is their type, what is their behavior, everything we can get information through this reflection API. Java reflection API, .NET reflection APIs will be there. C++ reflection API. OOP languages have a reflection library. That means every OOP language have a reflection library. That reflection library allows developers to explore and understand a library before implementing the library. That means how do I know what they have given? Suppose in a project, some classes are designed. You Google about that class, you will not get any help because that is their internal class. Then how another developer knows about it? That means you need to know through this reflection API. So every technology have this. So that means every technology is having the reflection API concept actual. So you see Java reflection API. You see there is a reflection API in Java. That means what actually it is Java reflection to examine or modify the behavior of a class. A developer can examine and he can modify the behavior of the class after examining the class, what it have, how it works through a reflection API. Every technology have. OOP concept means there will be reflection API. Reflection API. That means a developer have to track down the complete behavior and then he need to use it. Here what you can do is, because you are using a editor, one speciality here is just right click and you go to definition. Then it will use a reflection API and it will give you complete behavior performance about it. That means you see go to definition. So on click is derived from which handler? Mouse event handler. Okay. I want to know what is this mouse event handler came from where it came. Right click on mouse event handler and go to definition. It is coming from another location. What is it? Event handler. Mouse event handler is coming from event handler. Okay. Let's go to the definition of event handler and see. It is extending synthetic event. It is extending synthetic event. And who is this synthetic event? The base for all events. It is the base class for all events in React.js. That means all the events in React.js are derived from synthetic event base. This synthetic event is an virtual DOM event library. Virtual DOM related events are managed by this synthetic library. And this will map to the actual library. That means you want to go to definition of this synthetic event. Go to definition of synthetic event. You see synthetic event is again extending base synthetic event. You go to the definition of base synthetic event. This is the base synthetic event. Have you observed there is a target property? There is a target property. What is the purpose of this target property? Target property, and later you will try to understand about object, event and other things. What are these T, any and all this, because this is all TypeScript. Later you will understand. And have you observed prevent default? That means prevent default is a method, right? Prevent default is there, right? And what else is there? That means what else it is having? So it is having so many. These are all the event related actually. These are all event related. The base synthetic event, yeah, you can see this is the base synthetic event. Prevent default. This is prevent default. And there is a stop propagation, right? So it is having a stop propagation also. Prevent default, stop propagation. I will go back, right? You right click, go to definition, and you right click and go to definition. You will get all this. And you can see this is prevent default, and you see stop propagation. These are all the members of what event? event related members. That means actually your technologies are built with huge library in the background. You are saying that I am learning Java. You are saying that I am learning .NET. That means really to learn Java, it will take 10 years time. Means if you have to learn whatever they built. Really to learn any language like C# and all these, it will take minimum 10-15 years time to learn everything they build. By the time you learn, some more is built. Every year they are adding new things. That means what do you think you are learning Java or .NET means you are learning only what is needed for the projects. You are not learning everything. It's not possible. It's not possible. For example, you learnt about image. Na? Image, you learnt about image. IMG is an element. You learnt about image element in a HTML. What are attributes of image? Maximum you note some 10 attributes. Na? For image, how many attributes you know? Maximum 10 attributes. Width, height, SRC, alt and all these you know. You see, where IMG document.create element, we are creating an image element and I will use for, so where property in IMG, I am reading every property of image and I am printing them. I am printing every property of image, means I'm printing all the image related attributes. And you see all the image related attributes, these many are there. These are all image related attributes. These are all image related attributes. After all, you know 10 out of them. There are more than 50 or 100 about image. So about image, it will take 1 week for you to learn. But you will learn in HTML class for 5 minutes image. ID, name, SRC, alt. In 5 minutes, you will finish knowing about image. But you can know about image for 1 week. That is the reason, do you know, suppose if anybody shows experience like I have 15-20 years experience, suppose project manager say. Project manager, he worked on 15-20 projects. 15-20 projects. Now a new company have to take him. Without interview will they take? Now tell me in interview what I can ask to a 20 years experienced person. Do we have questions for him? Yes, we have. He can't answer them. We have. That means even you show 25-30 years of experience in one technology, I have still questions for you, you can't answer. Because your technology is so huge. And what is experience means in terms of software? Experience means working on a particular module systems for several years. And you are engaged with that. You are not aware of everything in the technology. You are aware of that particular project completely. It doesn't mean that you know everything in the technology. You just know only this. That means even after all, HTML is so huge. I showed you just about image. Now there are 30-40 elements. Now every element have hundreds of attributes. It will take a lot of time. That is the reason even see 10 years back, some people learned JavaScript, HTML from us. They already working 10 years, they are working as developers. In several projects they work. And suddenly sometimes they mail us saying that, sir, in my new project, I have this requirement, how to do this. I am not getting idea. But he worked already 10 years on the same concept. But in his new project, some new concept came which he never used. Now he have a doubt, is it possible to do in JavaScript and HTML? Then we have to tell him that yes, it is possible. You please check this library. Then he will explore that and he will try to implement that. That means even 15-20 years experience, he don't know several things in the concept because not required for him. That means in his projects, what he needs, he learns. That's the reason these are very huge. That means you may say that you told us only to stop propagation and target and prevent default, but there are so many now. Tell all this. Then you sit for 1 year here. I will tell everything. Right now, people with typical mindset, they say that, sir, you are not telling all this. I only 2, 3 you are telling out of all. That is silly thing. Why? Because even I tell you are not ready to take. You are not capable of taking it. Even I tell you are not capable of taking them because not required, wasting your time. Because you just need to know what is regularly used. That is the reason some new things will come. Some new concepts will come. They are actually not new, already there, but now we are going to use them. That means many people who know JavaScript, they don't know stop propagation. How you don't know stop propagation? It is a very general thing in real world project environment. Many people don't know prevent default, but they know JavaScript. That means that level of JavaScript is not enough for certain projects. You need more. You need to learn more. They are not advanced. They are already there. You don't know. You need to explore them, right? So many new concepts like event related you will come across here. That's the reason. So don't get into the concept of like, I want to learn everything about it. It's difficult. It cannot happen, right? Maximum what is required, I am giving you as an input here, right? So now one concept is ready. So how to collect event argument? How to collect event argument? We have to use what? E. Do I need to pass any event argument? Not required. Why? Because it is using a listener. Listener will attach a event argument. Then how to access the details? I will do one thing. I will use console.log. We will log. And in the console log, we want to display button ID. Tell me how to collect the button ID. e.target.id. So in the next line, I will use another one. What is it? We need class name. So how do we get the class name is e.target.class name. We have to get that. And in the next line, because I am using a console and here I want exposition. How do we get the exposition? Directly e dot what? Client X, like this. So we want an control key. That means CTRL key. Then directly we use e dot what? CTRL key. CTRL key. Now you see, let's open the inspect and console. And in the console, you check here. When I click on the insert button, what it is going to do. Yeah. So when I click on this insert button, it is going to display all these details. That means button ID, button class, button related position, and control key. I'm using a control key and clicking, then it says control is true. Right? So all the details we are accessing and displaying that. So what is the point about here is we can have default event arguments. Now what about custom? How do you pass custom arguments? How we can pass a custom argument? That means how you will pass. There is no place here to pass a custom argument. So now how do you pass the custom argument? Let's see that. So I will give one example. This is what? Event binding dot what? JSX. Event binding dot JSX. This is event binding dot JSX. Okay. Now comes another concept is how you define the custom arguments here. How do we define the custom arguments? Here another concept is how do we define the custom arguments? Observe carefully. This insert click, I am writing like a pointer, function pointer. Instead of writing like a pointer, now here what you can do is we can write a function. We can write a function, and in that function, actually suppose I am writing like general insert click parenthesis. In the parenthesis, I am passing some value. What is the value I am passing? Suppose I am passing a string, suppose TV, right? Now, usually I have to collect that. That means through E, I can collect. That means I will collect some name, and name is coming from what? E. What is our intention is this is passed inside the E and we will collect the value. That is general we done in JavaScript. I showed you yesterday. We are doing like that. Now you see here, so you refresh this and you see the TV is by default display. And I click on insert. When I click on insert, it is not displaying. I click on this insert, it is not displaying. The TV is by default displayed. By default displayed. Why? Because usually what happens is whenever you define event, generally event, usually what it will do, it will default pass the argument. It will not wait for you. I told you, no, listener is going to register at the time of mounting. At the time of mounting, when it registers, whatever you value you pass, it is collecting. It is not waiting for you to click. Why it is by default displaying before I click? Because now you understood the situation. I told you that events are registered at the time of mounting. At the time of mounting itself, event is registered. The value is collected. It is not waiting for you to click. So it should work. It should wait until I click. Then what we have to do is we need to define a function which will return this functionality. We have to define a function that returns this functionality. Otherwise, by default, it will register at the time of mounting. That means now what happens here? Refresh. Now you can see there is no default option. When I click on insert, it will get that. It is going to get that. That means can we pass custom arguments? Yes. But directly don't pass the custom arguments. If you directly pass the custom argument, then what will happen at the time of mounting itself? It will access. Then what we have to do is, so we need to do this. What is the meaning of this? It indicates that this functionality will be returned because it is written. Functionality will be returned only when it is clicked. It will not do by default because all events are registered automatically at the time of mounting. So make sure that you are defining the event with a return. Then you can pass the argument. For example, you see now I'm using TV, I'm using some number, I'm using some array. That means we are passing multiple values. We are passing multiple values and I am collecting here in the next line. So price, and how do we access the price? We need three arguments now. One is for what? Name, and second is what? Price, and third one is what? Cities. So here I will use, what is it? Name, another one is price, and another one is what? Cities. So cities. So cities, we will just use cities, which is an array. It will return as a string. That means you see here. Now when I click on insert, it is going to get all the details and display. That means we can pass custom arguments. But to pass custom arguments, we need to return like this. We need to return like this. So now here one more question is there. So another important question is how to configure custom arguments for event in React. How to configure custom arguments for event in React. So you need to define a function return with custom arguments in event handler. That means we have to write button on click is equal to, we need a function that returns insert click, and here args. You can pass your arguments. some button related text or anything and close the button. That is how you define. How to configure the custom arguments. How to configure default arguments? You don't need to configure default arguments. By default, default arguments will come. Now here challenging is how you will pass both default arguments and custom arguments. How do we pass both default and custom arguments? So now another important question is how to pass both default and custom arguments. How to pass both default and custom arguments. The default arguments and the custom arguments. Default and custom arguments. Then we need to use a technique. That means actually the function written configured, the function written configured in handler can have an event parameter which provides access to default events, Function written configured in handler. That means what it is, you have a button have what? On click, we are having this. Here we can pass event argument. That means that function can have an event argument. Insert click, so args. And along with your arguments, you can pass that event argument also. That's how we define actually. That means you can use the default arguments and you can use the custom arguments. These args are custom. This is default. Now you can pass both default as well as custom. So default and custom, both we can define. Default and custom we can configure. So how do we do that? That means how to configure this. So let's see, suppose I want default argument also. Remember, you can't have default when you are passing custom. Then what do you do? Into this function, we can pass an event argument. And actually, this is the default event argument. Here you cannot have anything else. You can have only default. And that event argument we will pass along with this. That means after this, I am using E. I am sending that E. You can send before, after, anywhere. And you know that according to that order only you have to collect it. That means how to collect event related details we can access by using what? Event or any reference you can give. Now how to display those details? What event can do? Event can get a button ID. How to get the button ID? Event dot target dot what? ID. Now it can get the class name. How do we get the class? So we have event dot target dot class name. That means we have now both default arguments and custom arguments. Now you see here when I refresh this and I click on this button, then you have default and custom arguments both. That means it is possible to pass only default arguments. It is possible to pass only custom arguments. It is possible to pass both default and custom arguments. For that, we need to understand this technique. This is example for event demo.jsx. That is the example how do we configure. So event, how to write in React, how the event handler works, and how the event arguments works. Now we need to explore all the events. All the events means what? Mouse events, keyboard events, button events, how to handle. Because with those concepts only, we can design various examples. Complete examples now depends on the events, right? For example, you are watching some page. Suppose you are watching some Flipkart. When you are watching Flipkart, some mobiles and some mobile you selected, and you see here the mobile details. Left side, you have a thumbnail preview. When I move the mouse onto that, that preview is changing right side. That means what is the event used here? Mouse over. On mouse over, it will get that image and it will show the source here. And here on mouse over, it is zooming that particular area. That means it is able to get its position, x-axis, y-axis. These are all mouse related events. These kind of designs we can create now by using React events. Now we have to learn all the events of React. That means mouse events, keyboard events, button events, how they work. That we'll see in next session. Right? Next session tomorrow holiday. So, and next session will be on Friday. Right? Friday we will continue. Monday no holiday. Monday we have session. Monday is Raksha Bandhan. We don't have any holiday on Monday. Monday we will have session. Our session tomorrow, no session. Again on Friday. Okay? Right.